Timestamp: 8:57 Tuesday, March 12, 1974. The dressmaking shop, a narrow two-story atelier tucked between a brick-faced cafe and a small stationery store in Midtown, opens to the low hum of early morning traffic. Sunlight diffuses through the street-facing windows, striking the polished wooden floors in shifting angular patterns that move with the passing minutes. Dust motes drift in the still air, catching the light like tiny, suspended prisms. The faint scent of cotton and silk intermingles with polished wood, and the residual aroma of brewing coffee drifting from the cafe across the street. Every morning, the dressmaker notes these subtle environmental details, registering them as context for later observation. Humidity slightly higher than usual, the particular angle of sunlight that might cause glare, the minor hum of a street lamp still active even in daylight. The dressmaker, a woman in her late 40s with a posture that suggests both grace and disciplined precision, begins her morning routine. She unlocks the front door with a practiced motion, adjusts the blinds to minimize glare on the measuring tables, and inspects her fabric inventory against a meticulously maintained handwritten ledger. Each bolt of cloth, linen, silk, taffeta, wool is counted and squared, aligned with precision. Scissors, chalks, pins, and sewing machines are arranged according to a rhythm honed over decades. Even the thread spools are aligned by color gradient and weight, an operational choreography meant to maximize efficiency while maintaining a subtle aesthetic order. Each motion is performed methodically, almost ritualistically. The dressmaker's eyes scan the shop as she works, noting not just tools and materials, but small environmental irregularities, a smudge on a tabletop, a crooked seam in a previously completed garment, the faint vibration from a streetcar tracks nearby. By 9:03, the first client of the day arrives. A woman in her mid-30s, carrying a well-worn leather satchel, enters in a tailored coat that bears minimal ornamentation. The dressmaker notes the precise minute of arrival as a matter of habit, having tracked her regular clients for weeks. Her trained eye detects a slight bulge at the left side of the coat, partially obscured by a loosely draped scarf. The client's movements are deliberate, controlled, almost mechanical, the weight of each step measured, each gesture economical, each hand movement precise. The dressmaker registers these details without judgment, recording them in a small observational notebook. Time of entry, gait, posture, and micro-gestures. For the first 15 minutes, the client removes her outerwear and provides instructions regarding garment alterations. The dressmaker documents fabric types, pattern preferences, seam tolerances, and the client's posture during measurements: upright shoulders, slightly tensed arms, head occasionally tilted toward the windows as if monitoring light or street activity. Even environmental factors such as ambient temperature, angle of sunlight, hum of traffic, or distant construction are logged in parallel, creating a multidimensional record. The client's precise folding of her scarf as she gestures, the careful placement of her satchel on the nearest chair, the subtle angling of her feet, all are noted with timestamps, reinforcing the habit of methodical observation. At 9:18, the client adjusts her scarf, momentarily obscuring the upper portion of her coat while surveying the shop. The dressmaker records the exact timing, hand angle, head movement, and duration of the gesture. Though minor, this anomaly is cataloged alongside previous appointments, building a longitudinal dataset of repeated behaviors. Such meticulous logging is habitual for the dressmaker, forming an invisible lattice of observation that frames every subsequent action. Routine shop operations proceed concurrently. The dressmaker moves among cutting tables and sewing machines, maintaining thread tension, fabric alignment, and stitch consistency. The rhythmic clack of the sewing machine foot pedal punctuates the quiet morning. Outside, street activity continues in predictable patterns. At 9:30, a delivery truck halts at the curb for 12 minutes, engine idling softly. At 9:42, a pedestrian previously observed in multiple appointments crosses the street in the same measured trajectory. These external variables are integrated into the observational log, providing context for client behavior and serving as potential triggers for subtle anomalies. The client requests privacy for certain fittings. Measurements are conducted in a rear room, away from windows and mirrors. Garments are handled separately on an isolated cutting table, with notes detailing the sequence of actions, lighting conditions, and duration of privacy requested. Such deviations from standard procedure are carefully documented. Even the angle at which the garment is draped, the exact fold of a sleeve, or the placement of pins is recorded. The dressmaker does not infer intent, only documents observable phenomena, constructing a rigorous procedural record. Between 10:05 and 10:25, additional microbehaviors are observed: repeated glances toward the shop entrance, precise folding of garments before bagging, repeated handling of fabric swatches in exact geometric alignment. Each gesture is time-stamped and contextualized with environmental conditions: distant street noise, a delivery truck's door clanging, faint conversation drifting from a nearby cafe. While these actions seem trivial individually, the dressmaker's methodical logging allows patterns to emerge over multiple weeks. At 10:30, the client departs, leaving a folded coat and partially completed alterations. The dressmaker notes the departure, estimating the client's route along the sidewalk, gait, posture, and minor deviations from previous patterns. These observations are procedural rather than interpretive, forming a comparative framework for ongoing documentation. Even the subtle shift in the client's shoulder as she adjusts her satchel is recorded. The morning continues with standard operations: cutting, stitching, pressing, and cataloging completed garments. During brief pauses, the dressmaker reviews her notes, cross-referencing appointment durations, measurements, and subtle behavioral anomalies. Recurrent elements begin to surface: repeated scarf adjustments, discreet glances, insistence on privacy. Individually insignificant, these anomalies, once logged across multiple appointments, form a growing constellation of irregularity. By 12:03, lunchtime offers an opportunity to extend observational context. Street traffic is logged, along with neighboring business activity, pedestrian patterns, and incidental disturbances such as car horns, distant sirens, and construction vibrations. Temperature fluctuations, daylight angles, and minor auditory cues are cataloged in precise detail. Even the pattern of shadows cast by the cafe awning across the sidewalk is noted, reinforcing the dressmaker's habit of integrating environmental data into behavioral analysis. Afternoon preparations for upcoming appointments involve logistical calculations: fabric deliveries, overlapping schedules, sewing machine maintenance, and minor shop repairs. Each is recorded methodically, with timestamps, durations, and deviations from prior norms. The dressmaker maintains continuity by cross-referencing these notes with historical observations, creating a baseline for detecting anomalies in both client behavior and operational rhythm. Throughout the day, emphasis remains on micro-detail: the curl of a hem, the precise angle of a collar fold, the subtle alignment of buttons. The dressmaker's perception of gesture, timing, and environmental subtleties builds the latent framework for noticing deviations. Time-stamped observational logs serve as a lattice upon which future inference may rest, while maintaining the slow burn tension characteristic of procedural intelligence narratives. By 16:50, the shop closes. Ledgers, observational notes, and fabric records are cataloged systematically. While no overt incident has occurred, the accumulation of microbehavioral anomalies, a subtle hand adjustment, scarf repositioning, unusual insistence on privacy, creates a sense of latent irregularity. The dressmaker's methodical record-keeping establishes a structured framework, preserving every nuance, every anomaly, and every environmental cue. Each time-stamped observation contributes to an evolving understanding that something is subtly amiss, though its nature remains undetermined. The day ends with the dressmaker carefully locking the front door, drawing blinds to their final position, and placing her observational notebook in a secure drawer. Patterns noted across weeks, gestures, glances, environmental responsiveness, linger in her mind. There is a rhythm to the anomalies, micro-adjustments that appear purposive, repeated behaviors that resist casual explanation, moments of insistence that seem slightly beyond routine preference. While the client's purpose remains unknown, the accumulation of detailed procedural observation ensures that no irregularity, however minor, will be overlooked. By the time the streetlights flicker on, marking the transition from late afternoon to early evening, the atelier sits quietly, every bolt of fabric squared, every machine cleaned and oiled, every note meticulously cataloged. Outside, traffic flows with its usual rhythm, pedestrians continue their predictable paths, and the distant hum of the city persists. Inside, the dressmaker reviews her observational logs one final time, noting small consistencies and deviations, reinforcing her mental map of patterns, and preparing for the next day's appointments. The slow burn tension, subtle yet undeniable, is embedded in each line of recorded observation, setting the stage for what will soon move beyond routine habit into the threshold of discovery. Timestamp: 8:45 Wednesday, March 13, 1974, the atelier awakens with the pre-dawn light filtering through the tall, street-facing windows, casting narrow rectangles of soft illumination across polished wooden floors. Dust motes, suspended in the stillness, catch each beam and drift lazily with the faint morning draft that enters as the door is unlocked. The air carries a familiar medley of scents: cotton, silk, polished wood, and the subtle, almost imperceptible odor of the previous day's thread oils. Even before coffee from a neighboring cafe begins its aroma drift, the dressmaker notes the atmosphere, the faint creak of floorboards, the low vibration of streetcars passing, and the temperature shift indicating the morning chill is slowly lifting. The dressmaker's routine is precise, as always: blinds adjusted to balance glare and illumination, cutting tables cleared and aligned, sewing machines oiled and tested, and fabric bolts squared to exact symmetry. Each movement is measured, habitual, yet attentive to minute deviations from prior days. A faint scratch on the mahogany table edge, slightly misaligned pins in the spool rack, the unusual tilt of a chair leg, all are cataloged with a mental note for comparison. By 9 o'clock, the familiar client enters, carrying her leather satchel and wearing the same tailored coat from the previous day, though today the scarf is arranged differently, concealing a broader portion of the coat. Her arrival is punctual, precise to the minute, as though synced to a clock unseen by others. The dressmaker notes a subtle stiffening of the client's posture, a deliberate straightening of the spine, and the careful placement of her satchel beside the measuring table. The bulge previously observed at the side of her coat is again faintly discernible, though partially obscured by the scarf. The client moves with calculated efficiency, shedding outerwear and preparing for measurements with gestures that suggest familiarity and control. Every motion, how the hands smooth the coat, the subtle adjustment of her scarf, the slight shift of weight from one foot to the other, is logged in the notebook with exact timing, angle of movement, and environmental context. The dressmaker records a background: faint street noise, a delivery van passing at 9:12, footsteps of a pedestrian on the opposite sidewalk, the occasional car horn echoing from nearby avenues. Each minor detail is noted not for speculation, but for establishing a procedural baseline. Between 9:15 and 9:40, the dressmaker observes behaviors that deviate subtly from prior visits. The client occasionally glances toward the door, pausing mid-measurement, and briefly tugs at her scarf in ways not purely functional. Each micro-movement is timed, annotated, and compared to prior sessions. She places fabric swatches on the table in geometric alignment, then rearranges them, as though testing spatial relationships rather than selecting materials. The dressmaker notes the recurrence. Similar gestures on prior appointments had seemed trivial, but the repetition suggests an emerging pattern. The client requests private fitting in the rear room. This is standard practice, yet today she lingers slightly longer before entering, her gaze sweeping the shop in controlled sweeps. The dressmaker logs the deviation from ordinary routine: time spent waiting, minor hand gestures, and subtle adjustments of garments on the cutting table. Even the ambient conditions, light angle, reflection off the polished wooden floor, distant street noise, are recorded to correlate environmental factors with client behavior. At 9:50, while measuring a sleeve, the dressmaker notices a brief flash of metallic reflection from within the coat lining as the client adjusts it. It is subtle, almost imperceptible, a glint that disappears as quickly as it appeared. The dressmaker does not react, only notes the exact moment, duration, and potential triggers. Later, when reviewing her longitudinal records, she will compare this to previous sessions for similar anomalies. Routine shop activity continues alongside observational logging. The hum of the sewing machines, the rhythmic clack of scissors on the cutting board, and the quiet rustle of fabric create a controlled auditory backdrop. Outside, pedestrians cross the street with familiar patterns, delivery vehicles arrive and depart at predictable intervals, and the distant city hum forms a steady baseline. These environmental cues are recorded meticulously, ensuring that any variance in client behavior can be assessed against a comprehensive contextual map. From 10:10 to 10:35, the client exhibits additional micro-behaviors: repeated folding of garments into precise rectangles, subtle shifting of the satchel to maintain coverage of the coat's side, and intermittent glances toward the entrance. Each action is annotated with timestamp, spatial relation, angle of movement, and concurrent environmental observations. The dressmaker notes that while individual behaviors may seem insignificant, the combination of repeated anomalies across multiple appointments begins to form a subtle pattern of irregularity. At 10:40, the client departs, leaving behind a folded coat and partially completed alterations. The dressmaker logs the departure meticulously, estimated route along the sidewalk, posture, gait, hand movements, and any observed deviations from prior exits. Even the positioning of the coat on the cutting table and the minor shift of pins during packing are recorded. Each entry reinforces the procedural framework, allowing for cross-referencing in subsequent reviews. After the client leaves, the dressmaker reviews her notes from previous days alongside today's observations. Certain elements recur: scarf adjustments, brief glints of metallic objects, insistence on privacy, and repeated attention to spatial arrangement. The observations, while individually mundane, collectively suggest deliberate patterning. The dressmaker does not infer motive, only records facts: times, gestures, environmental context, and duration of actions. By 12:15, lunchtime provides an opportunity to extend environmental observation beyond the immediate shop. Pedestrian patterns along the adjacent sidewalks are cataloged, frequency, trajectory, and attire noted for familiarity. Street noise is logged: distant sirens, car engines, faint conversations, and a delivery truck backing into the alley at 12:22. Ambient light shifts are recorded, capturing changes in angle, intensity, and shadow across both shop floor and fabric displays. Temperature and humidity are noted with minor fluctuations, providing a full context for correlating client behaviors to environmental conditions. Afternoon operations involve multiple layers of activity: preparing garments for the next appointments, reviewing prior adjustments, cataloging fabrics, and checking sewing equipment. Each task is annotated with time, duration, and procedural steps. Deviations from standard workflow, delayed sewing machine maintenance, overlapping appointments, or minor misalignments in folded fabric are documented as potential stressors that might influence client behavior. From 13:45 to 14:30, the dressmaker observes subtle anomalies in routine operations. A bolt of silk is misaligned slightly on the shelf. The pattern of light from the window creates an unusual glare on the measuring table. The rear room door squeaks when the breeze hits. While minor, these factors are incorporated into the ongoing record, forming a contextual map that frames client behavior as part of a larger environmental system. By mid-afternoon, the dressmaker notices a cumulative effect. While no overt irregularity is apparent, the combination of repeated scarf adjustments, discreet glances, insistence on private fitting, and minor metallic glints suggests an underlying intentionality. Yet, she remains procedural in her documentation. Observations remain objective, each detail time-stamped, each environmental condition noted, and each deviation logged for longitudinal comparison. The slow burn of suspicion builds, grounded not in conjecture but in observable facts. Between 1510 and 1600 hours, small operational tasks are completed: pressing garments, trimming threads, cataloging fabric bolts, and arranging workspaces. Each is conducted alongside continued observational logging. The precise placement of pins, alignment of garments, folding angles, and spatial relations are all documented. Even the client's previous pattern of glances toward the entrance is compared with today's session, noting duration, frequency, and subtle differences in angle or posture. By 16:15, the dressmaker's awareness of patterns deepens. Environmental cues, procedural logs, and client behaviors intersect to form a subtle network of anomalies. While still insufficient to draw conclusions about motive, the data points collectively suggest a deviation from ordinary customer behavior. These patterns insist in privacy. Glances toward the door, scarf adjustments, metallic reflections are preserved in the notebook for future reference, forming the foundation for potential recognition of unusual activity. As the afternoon wanes and 16:50 approaches, the shop prepares for closure. Ledgers, observational notebooks, and fabric records are cataloged. Machines are cleaned, thread spools replaced, and cutting tables returned to precise alignment. The dressmaker locks the door, ensuring that every minor anomaly recorded throughout the day remains protected within the secure, methodically organized space of the atelier. Patterns are reviewed once more: micro-adjustments, glints, repeated privacy requests. While no definitive discovery has occurred, the dressmaker's procedural diligence has created a lattice of observation, a slow burn tension that hints at the possibility of something hidden just beneath the surface of routine. By evening, The atelier sits quietly in fading daylight. Dust motes continue to drift, catching the low-angle light. Outside, pedestrians traverse predictable paths, and the distant hum of the city continues uninterrupted. Inside, every stitch, every fold, and every recorded anomaly stands as a silent testament to the dressmaker's observational rigor. The patterns of the client's behavior, once abstract and easily dismissed, now form a subtle constellation of irregularity, waiting for a moment when routine observation may tip toward recognition, revealing the extraordinary beneath the ordinary. Timestamp: 8:52, Thursday, March 14, 1974. Dawn arrives with a pale wash of light over the midtown streets. The atelier remains shrouded in quiet anticipation. Dust motes catch the weak sunbeams streaming through the front windows, floating in irregular patterns across polished wooden floors. The air carries the familiar mingling of cotton, silk, and polished wood, but today there is an additional note: the faint metallic scent of a small pin that has been dropped and rolled beneath the cutting table overnight. Every detail is noted, logged mentally, as if the shop itself participates in a network of observation. The dressmaker begins her routine with the same meticulous precision as always. Blinds are adjusted to ensure minimal glare, cutting tables aligned at exact angles, sewing machines oiled and calibrated. Each bolt of fabric is counted, squared, and realigned to maintain symmetry, while thread spools are organized according to hue and weight. Subtle environmental changes are logged: the slight draft from the door, the creak of the staircase, and the low hum of streetcars on nearby tracks. Even minor deviations, such as the unusual tilt of a chair leg or a small smudge on the window ledge, are annotated. By 9 o'clock, the familiar client arrives, carrying her leather satchel and wearing the tailored coat. The scarf is arranged to conceal the upper left portion of the coat, but this time, her movements carry a faintly heightened tension. The dressmaker observes a quick, almost imperceptible glance over her shoulder toward the door, followed by a deliberate, careful smoothing of the coat. Every movement is time-stamped: entry at 9 o'clock, placement of satchel at 9:01, coat adjustment at 9:02, glance toward door at 9:03. The client's measured gestures continue, removing outerwear, preparing for measurements, and aligning fabric swatches on the table. Today, the dressmaker notes an additional anomaly. While arranging a swatch, the client's hand pauses briefly over the table, fingers slightly curled, before straightening again. The pause lasts less than a second, but is unusual compared to previous visits, where swatches were handled with continuous motion. The dressmaker records the timestamp and duration, along with environmental context: distant street noise, the faint rumble of a delivery truck at 9:07, and a brief vibration through the floorboards from a nearby construction site. Between 9:15 and 9:45, the client requests private fitting in the rear room. While closing the door behind her, the dressmaker notices a subtle bulge within the lining of the coat, partially obscured by the scarf. It is not immediately clear what this represents: a pin, a small object, a reflection, but it is logged as a deviation from prior sessions. The dressmaker notes light angle, posture, and exact duration of movements: how the coat is draped, how the scarf is adjusted, how her hands linger near the concealed area. At 9:47, the client momentarily pauses while adjusting the coat, then straightens and tilts her head toward the rear window. Sunlight catches a faint metallic glint at the seam. The dressmaker does not reach for the coat or react overtly, only documents the precise timing, angle, and environmental conditions. Observations are purely procedural, emphasizing data collection over conjecture. During the routine measurement, the client's behavior becomes incrementally more unusual. She touches the satchel with both hands, adjusts the scarf 3 times in under 15 seconds, and places the swatches back on the table in slightly different geometric arrangements than previously observed. Each adjustment is logged: 9:50, scarf reposition left; 9:51, swatches realigned; 9:52, satchel adjusted closer to body. The dressmaker notes even micro-adjustments in posture: slight tensing of shoulders, flexing of fingers, and the subtle lift of heels as weight shifts. While the client is still in the rear room, the dressmaker reviews her longitudinal notes, comparing anomalies over the past 3 days. Recurrent elements emerge: scarf adjustments, discrete glints of metallic objects, insistence on private fitting, glances toward the door. Individually minor, collectively they suggest deliberate, non-routine behavior. Today's added anomaly, the brief pause over the swatches, fits this emerging pattern. The dressmaker does not speculate on motive but recognizes the significance of recurring, time-stamped deviations. From 10 to 10:30, the atelier operates under its usual rhythm. Sewing machines hum steadily, scissors punctuate the quiet, and fabric is cut, pressed, and catalogued. Outside, pedestrians maintain predictable patterns. Street traffic proceeds with habitual rhythm. Each environmental cue is recorded, allowing the dressmaker to compare client behavior against a stable baseline. A passing delivery van at 10:05, the faint bark of a dog from across the street at 10:12, and the distant toll of a church bell at 10:18 are all noted. These seemingly trivial details provide contextual layers for interpreting observed anomalies. At 10:32, the client emerges from the rear room carrying the partially completed coat. As she approaches the front door, the dressmaker observes a fleeting, controlled gesture. The client slides a small object from within her coat lining into her palm, concealing it with the scarf. The motion is deliberate, precise, and unlike anything previously observed. Though subtle, it is logged in exact detail: time, hand angle, direction of movement, duration, and environmental context. The client departs at 10:35, leaving behind the coat and satchel. The dressmaker notes her gait, estimated route along the sidewalk, posture, hand movements, and any deviations from prior exits. Even the minor shift of the coat on the cutting table is logged. Each data point contributes to the growing procedural record, reinforcing patterns that suggest purposeful concealment or activity beyond ordinary customer behavior. From 10:40 to 11:30, the dressmaker continues with shop operations, cutting fabric, cataloging completed garments, oiling sewing machines, and aligning thread spools. Each task is recorded with timestamp, duration, and environmental factors. A faint vibration from a nearby construction site, the shifting light angles, and distant sirens are noted alongside these procedural details. The interplay of environment, task, and client behavior forms a comprehensive observational map. Between 11:35 and 12 o'clock, the dressmaker reviews longitudinal data. Recurrent patterns are now unmistakable. Scarf adjustments, brief glints of metallic objects, insistence on private fittings, unusual folding of swatches, and deliberate hand movements near concealed coat areas. While no overt espionage has been confirmed, the repeated, precise anomalies create a lattice of potential significance. The dressmaker annotates each pattern with cross-references to prior appointments, ensuring that even minor deviations are preserved for cumulative analysis. Lunchtime arrives at 12:05, and the dressmaker steps into the small rear space for a brief meal. Environmental observation continues. Pedestrian flow, delivery patterns, and the rhythm of distant street noise are logged. A delivery truck pauses at the curb at 12:12, a pedestrian pauses mid-crosswalk at 12:14, and a faint car horn echoes from side street at 12:17. Even these external details are recorded as part of the procedural framework, allowing the dressmaker to correlate environmental factors with client behaviors and anomalies. Afternoon appointments continue, though the day's focus remains on the emerging pattern of the primary client. From 13 to 1400 hours, additional minor anomalies are observed: brief glances toward the rear window, repeated adjustment of a scarf, subtle handling of the satchel, and careful repositioning of swatches in geometric alignment. Each action is logged with precise timestamps, angle measurements, duration, and environmental conditions. The dressmaker notes that these actions, while small, reinforce the recurring pattern: deliberate behavior outside ordinary customer practice. From 14:05 to 1500 hours, the atelier hums with routine activity: fabric cutting, pressing garments, cataloging supplies, but the dressmaker's attention is divided, comparing current observations with previous sessions. She identifies emergent clusters of anomalies: scarf manipulation coinciding with metallic glints, privacy requests coinciding with subtle hand concealment, and micro-adjustments of swatches correlating with glances toward doors or windows. Patterns are noted for potential future significance, though motive remains undetermined. By 15:15, the dressmaker has documented sufficient data to detect a subtle escalation. The anomalies, while individually minor, collectively suggest intentionality. The scarf adjustments now appear less habitual and more strategic, the metallic reflections more frequent, and the privacy insistence more pronounced. Environmental context, light angle, vibration, pedestrian movement, is annotated alongside behavioral deviations, ensuring that any subsequent analysis has a robust procedural foundation. From 1550 to 1645, shop operations continue under meticulous documentation. Thread alignment, fabric folding, and garment cataloging are executed precisely, while observations of anomalies are cross-referenced with prior patterns. Even minor deviations in shop routine, such as the squeak of a floorboard or the tilt of a chair, are noted for potential contextual influence on client behavior. The dressmaker's procedural vigilance ensures that no detail, however small, escapes systematic recording. By 1650, as the day closes, the dressmaker catalogs her notes, ledger entries, and fabric records. Patterns are reviewed, repeated scarf adjustments, discreet metallic glints, insistence on private fitting, careful hand movements near concealed areas. While the client's motives remain opaque, the accumulation of detailed procedural observation has created a lattice of anomalies, each cross-referenced and contextualized. The slow burn tension is palpable, and the structured framework of observation has primed the dressmaker for the eventual threshold of discovery. Evening arrives. Sunlight fades across the polished floorboards, dust motes drift silently, and the distant city hum continues. The atelier, orderly and precise, holds the day's observations like a silent witness. Every stitch, fold, glint, and gesture has been logged, forming a procedural scaffold upon which the narrative of suspicion is built. Patterns that once seemed trivial now hint at something deliberate, something hidden beneath the ordinary. The stage is set. The first clues of espionage are no longer accidental. They are observable, time-stamped, and recorded, awaiting the moment when the dressmaker's methodical vigilance will converge with revelation. Timestamp: 8:50, Friday, March 15, 1974. The atelier greets another early morning with quiet ritual. Sunlight enters in narrow, shifting bands, illuminating dust motes that drift lazily above polished wooden floors. The familiar scent of silk, cotton, and polished wood fills the air, punctuated faintly by the metallic tang of pins scattered beneath cutting tables. Each day begins with precise attention to detail. Blinds adjusted, cutting tables squared, sewing machines oiled, thread spools aligned in perfect gradient, fabric bolts counted, folded, and stacked. The dressmaker's attention to environment is exacting. Every minor variation logged. A floorboard creaks slightly sharper than usual, a faint vibration from a passing delivery truck, the shifting angle of sunlight reflecting off window panes. By 9 o'clock, the client enters the atelier. Her leather satchel swings slightly, her tailored coat adjusted carefully beneath a scarf that conceals the familiar upper left bulge. The dressmaker notes her posture, straight-backed, shoulders tense just enough to suggest vigilance, heels slightly lifted as weight shifts. A micro-gesture catches the eye, a deliberate pause with her right hand near the coat pocket, fingers flexing just enough to suggest controlled concealment. The precise timing is recorded. 9 o'clock entry, 9:01 satchel placed on chair, 9:02 coat adjustment, 9:03 hand flex. The client's motions are measured, almost ritualistic. She removes outerwear with careful efficiency, arranges fabric swatches in geometric alignment, and positions the partially completed coat on the cutting table with exacting care. Between 9:10 and 9:40, anomalies accumulate, repeated scarf adjustments, discrete metallic glints, micro-gestures near concealed areas. Each deviation is documented with timestamp, spatial coordinates relative to the cutting table, duration, and environmental context, light angle, floor vibration, ambient street noise. Today, a new detail emerges. At 9:18, the client pauses mid-measurement, briefly glancing toward the rear window. In that moment, a faint outline of a rectangular object is discernible beneath the coat lining. The reflection catches sunlight at an acute angle for less than a second. The dressmaker notes this precisely. Timestamp, angle of observation, object shape, estimated dimensions, and duration. She does not attempt to remove or investigate the object. Observation is methodical, procedural, and deliberately non-intrusive. By 9:45, the client requests private fitting in the rear room. The door closes behind her with a soft click. The dressmaker documents the timing, light conditions in the room, and duration of entry. While the client moves about inside, there are subtle gestures that appear increasingly deliberate, repeated folding of swatches, careful realignment of the coat, slight, controlled tugs at the scarf to maintain concealment of the object. Even the manner in which she handles her satchel suggests an acute awareness of surveillance, or the absence of it. From 9:50 to 10:20, the dressmaker's attention sharpens. Cross-referencing longitudinal data from previous sessions, she notes an unmistakable pattern. Scarf adjustments coincide consistently with metallic reflections. Privacy requests occur concurrently with hand movements toward concealed objects. Micro-glances toward doors or windows appear at intervals that suggest timed monitoring rather than habit. Individually, each gesture is innocuous. Collectively, they indicate purposeful behavior outside ordinary customer norms. At 10:25, a moment occurs that crystallizes suspicion. While adjusting the coat, the client inadvertently exposes a small rectangular object tucked beneath the lining for a fraction of a second. Sunlight reflects off its surface, revealing edges that do not correspond to any known garment accessory. The dressmaker does not reach for it. Instead, she logs the anomaly with procedural precision. Timestamp, reflection angle, size estimation, and relative position within the coat. The object disappears as the scarf is readjusted. Though subtle, this fleeting glimpse confirms a repeated pattern of concealed items and deliberate micro-movements. Routine shop operations proceed alongside observation. Sewing machines hum steadily, scissors punctuate the quiet, fabric is cut, pressed, and cataloged. Environmental details continue to be noted. Distant sirens, a delivery truck idling briefly at 10:32, pedestrian crossing patterns, the low vibration from nearby construction. These cues are logged meticulously to provide a robust baseline for analyzing client behavior in context. By 10:40, the client departs, carrying the partially completed coat. The dressmaker records her exit in full procedural detail: gait, estimated route along the sidewalk, posture, hand movements, timing, and deviations from prior exits. Even the minor movement of the coat on the cutting table is noted. Each entry adds a critical data point to the longitudinal record, reinforcing recurring patterns that point toward deliberate concealment and behavior outside ordinary parameters. From 10:45 to 11:30, the atelier hums with routine activity. Fabric bolts are squared, thread spools aligned, garments pressed and cataloged. While performing these tasks, the dressmaker cross-references observations from the past 3 days. Patterns crystallize: repeated scarf adjustments, metallic reflections, insistence on private fittings, micro-glances toward doors or windows. Recurrent elements now appear as intentional signals, carefully masked beneath ordinary behavior. At 11:35, the dressmaker makes a procedural breakthrough. Reviewing her time-stamped logs and environmental annotations, she identifies a sequence: scarf adjustment, brief metallic glint, micro-glance toward door, private fitting request. This sequence repeats consistently across all observed appointments, varying only slightly in timing. Individually, each component seemed inconsequential. Together, they form a predictable behavioral chain, suggesting deliberate concealment and controlled observation. Between 11:40 and 12:05, minor environmental anomalies intersect with client behavior. Light angles create brief reflections on polished surfaces. Floor vibrations amplify during passing delivery trucks. Distant street noise fluctuates with pedestrian density. The dressmaker logs all variables, noting the precise moment each environmental factor coincides with client microactions. By integrating context with behavior, she constructs a multi-layered map of observable anomalies, preparing for potential recognition of intent or motive. Lunch arrives at 12:10. Yet the dressmaker maintains procedural vigilance. Observations extend beyond the immediate shop. Pedestrian movement, delivery activity, traffic flow, and light changes are logged for comparative analysis. Even brief interruptions, such as a car horn or dog barking across the street, are recorded, creating a comprehensive dataset against which client behavior is evaluated. Afternoon appointments continue, but the focus remains on the recurring client. Between 1300 hours and 1400 hours, further anomalies are observed: repeated micro-adjustments of scarf, careful manipulation of swatches in geometric alignment, brief glints of metallic objects within the coat lining, and controlled hand movements toward concealed areas. Each action is precisely logged: timestamp, angle, duration, environmental conditions. From 1410 to 1450, the dressmaker conducts a detailed comparative review of her longitudinal notes. Sequences emerge consistently: glances toward doors or windows, metallic reflections, scarf adjustments, insistence on privacy. Deviations from normal customer behavior are now unmistakable, recurring with remarkable regularity. While motive remains undetermined, the procedural rigor of observation has created a framework for systematic recognition of irregularity. At 1500 hours, the dressmaker experiences a procedural revelation. The accumulation of micro-behaviors, environmental context, and longitudinal patterns allows her to predict, with minor precision, the client's next set of movements, a scarf adjustment at the entrance, followed by a brief metallic glint, then a private fitting request. This predictive capability, derived purely from careful observation and time-stamped data, represents the first moment when routine documentation intersects with actionable suspicion. From 1505 to 1550, shop operations continue with meticulous precision. Sewing machines hum, scissors punctuate the quiet, fabrics are pressed, folded, and catalogued. Observational logs are updated, integrating today's anomalies with previous entries. Even the slightest deviation, tilted thread spool, shifted fabric bolt, or unusual reflection on polished wood, is noted. The dressmaker now understands that the observed patterns are neither random nor coincidental. They suggest deliberate concealment, controlled behavior, and a potentially hidden objective. By 1600 hours, the client returns for an additional fitting. The dressmaker notes her arrival, posture, gait, hand movements, and placement of outerwear. The scarf is adjusted to conceal the familiar upper left bulge. Today, the client carries the leather satchel slightly higher, shielding the coat lining from view. Each subtle gesture is logged with timestamp, environmental context, and sequence reference to prior patterns. The client's routine is now predictable, yet precise, almost ritualistic. Between 1610 and 1640, the client's behavior confirms prior patterns. Scarf adjustments coincide with metallic reflections, glances toward doors or windows, and requests for privacy. Micro-movements of hands and shoulders, combined with repeated spatial realignment of garments and swatches, reinforce the structured nature of her behavior. The dressmaker continues to observe without inference, maintaining strict procedural rigor while internalizing the developing significance of these repeated actions. As 1650 approaches, the shop closes. Ledgers, observational notebooks, and fabric records are cataloged. Patterns are reviewed and cross-referenced. Scarf adjustments, metallic glints, privacy insistence, hand concealments. While the client's purpose remains unknown, the cumulative record has shifted from routine observation to systematic suspicion. The dressmaker has assembled a lattice of anomalies, each annotated with precision, creating a framework ready for the next phase: confirmation, confrontation, or eventual evening descends. The atelier stands silent, every stitch, fold, and observation preserved. Dust motes drift through beams of fading light, and the distant city hum continues. Each micro-gesture, each reflection, each procedural log is a piece of a puzzle, the slow burn tension of hidden activity becoming increasingly tangible. Patterns converge. The first tangible clues of espionage have emerged, carefully recorded, time-stamped, and catalogued, awaiting the moment when observation transforms into understanding. Timestamp: 8:55, Saturday, March 16, 1974. The atelier awakens with the pale glow of early morning sun filtering through the street-facing windows. Dust motes float in irregular, slow arcs across polished wooden floors, catching the light and creating the faint illusion of suspended particles in motion. The air carries the familiar blend of cotton, silk, polished wood, and thread oil, but today there is an added note: the faint metallic tang of pins recently displaced beneath the cutting tables. Every minute environmental nuance is logged mentally, providing a baseline for interpreting both routine activity and subtle anomalies. The dressmaker begins her day with procedural rigor, blinds adjusted to optimize natural lighting for both measurement and observation, cutting tables squared and aligned, sewing machines oiled and tested, thread spools arranged in precise gradient, and fabric bolts counted and squared for operational symmetry. Each motion is deliberate and time-stamped mentally. 8:55, unlock front door. 8:56, adjust blinds. 8:57, inspect fabric inventory. 8:58, arrange cutting tools and machines. 8:59, align thread spools. Environmental cues, floorboard creaks, distant street hum, and shifting sunlight are logged as part of a cumulative observational framework. By 9 o'clock, the familiar client enters. Her leather satchel swings slightly, coat tailored and neat, scarf arranged to conceal the upper left bulge. The dressmaker notes posture: straight-backed, shoulders tensed, head slightly tilted to the left, heels lifted with controlled weight shifts. Hand gestures are deliberate, precise, and consistent with prior patterns. Fingers flex near the coat pocket, momentary pause before adjusting scarf. All microactions are logged with timestamp and contextual notes. The client removes outerwear and positions the partially completed coat on the cutting table. Fabric swatches are aligned geometrically, but today there is a notable deviation. One swatch is rotated at a slightly different angle than prior sessions. The dressmaker records this minor anomaly, 9:05, rotation noted 3 degrees clockwise relative to previous alignment, duration 4 seconds, adding to the growing catalog of subtle behavioral deviations. Between 9:10 and 9:40, the client requests a private fitting in the rear room. The door closes with a soft click. The dressmaker observes micro-behaviors through peripheral vision. Repeated scarf adjustments, slight tilting of the head toward the rear window, and precise handling of garments near the concealed coat lining. A faint metallic glint catches sunlight at 9:17 for approximately 1.2 seconds. The dressmaker does not intervene but records the event, timestamp, angle of reflection, approximate dimensions, and position within coat lining. By 9:42, a pattern emerges more clearly than ever before. Scarf adjustments consistently precede brief metallic reflections, which in turn coincide with micro-glances toward the entrance or window. This sequence repeats across 4 observed appointments. Individually, each gesture seemed trivial. Collectively, they now suggest intentional concealment and controlled monitoring of the environment. The dressmaker logs this as a structured sequence, noting 1. Scarf adjustment, 2. Metallic reflection, 3. Micro-glance, 4. Private fitting. All timestamps, angles, durations, and environmental cues are included for cross-reference. During the routine measurements, another anomaly appears. The client's hand hovers near the coat lining for 3.6 seconds, longer than previous sessions, a duration logged with precision. Simultaneously, there is a faint, nearly imperceptible bulge within the lining, shifting slightly as she moves. Environmental factors are noted. Sunlight angle, vibration from a passing streetcar at 9:45, faint conversation drifting from a cafe across the street. All micro details are meticulously recorded to preserve the procedural integrity of observation. Between 9:50 and 10:20, the client continues private fitting. She repeatedly aligns swatches, adjusts the scarf, and manipulates the satchel's placement with subtle variations from prior patterns. Each minor deviation is logged, swatch placement time-stamped, scarf repositioning duration noted, satchel angle relative to the cutting table recorded. Cross-referencing with longitudinal data, the dressmaker identifies increased consistency in certain behaviors. Metallic glints coincide predictably with scarf adjustments, indicating deliberate concealment of small objects within the coat. At 10:22, the client inadvertently allows a slightly longer glimpse of the object within the coat lining as she reaches to smooth the fabric. Sunlight reflects briefly off the surface, revealing the object's rectangular shape. The dressmaker, maintaining procedural detachment, logs timestamp, reflection angle, estimated dimensions, duration, and relative position. This observation confirms prior suspicions. Repeated metallic glints are not accidental, nor are they coincidental with scarf adjustments. A deliberate concealment is in place. Routine shop operations continue, yet the dressmaker's attention is increasingly analytical. Thread spools are aligned, fabrics squared, garments pressed and cataloged, all while observing environmental interactions, passing pedestrians, distant sirens, delivery trucks halting briefly, and floor vibrations from nearby construction. Each external factor is logged to correlate with client microactions, ensuring any deviations are contextualized. By 10:40, the client departs briefly, leaving the partially completed coat. The dressmaker logs her exit in procedural detail: gait, hand placement on satchel, posture, sidewalk trajectory, and any deviation from previous exits. Even minor details such as the coat's position on the cutting table and subtle shifts in pin placement are annotated. Each data point reinforces longitudinal patterns, supporting emerging recognition of deliberate concealment. After the departure, the dressmaker reviews accumulated observations from prior days. A multi-layered sequence emerges: 1. Scarf adjustment, 2. Metallic reflection, 3. Micro-glance toward door or window for private fitting request, 5. Subtle handling of concealed object. Each repetition, time-stamped and environmental contextualized, indicates intentional behavior. While motive is still unconfirmed, the pattern represents the first concrete evidence suggesting non-routine, potentially clandestine activity. Lunchtime, 12:05, provides a window for extended contextual observation. Pedestrian patterns, delivery schedules, traffic flow, and sunlight shifts are logged. Minor environmental anomalies, brief gusts of wind, distant horn blasts, low-frequency vibration, are noted alongside their temporal coincidence with client microactions. This procedural rigor reinforces the framework for systematic recognition, correlating environment with behavior. Afternoon sessions between 1300 hours and 1400 hours involve standard operational tasks, cutting, pressing, and cataloging garments. Simultaneously, longitudinal data is reviewed and cross-referenced with the current client's behaviors. Recurrent anomalies are highlighted: repeated scarf adjustments, metallic glints, private fitting insistence, micro-glances, and deliberate hand movements toward concealed coat areas. Each repetition is documented in sequence, with time-stamped environmental notes. From 1410 to 1450, the dressmaker makes a critical observation. A folded note or container seems to shift subtly within the coat lining as the client adjusts her scarf. While fleeting and partially obscured, the movement aligns with prior metallic reflections and microglances. Time-stamped documentation captures the precise moment, duration, and environmental context. This observation consolidates previous suspicions. The client is handling a concealed object with deliberate care, potentially indicative of clandestine exchange. At 1500 hours, the client returns for an additional fitting. She repeats established micro-patterns: scarf adjustment, metallic glint, micro-glance, private fitting request. This repetition confirms the reliability of previously recorded behavioral sequences. The dressmaker logs each microaction meticulously, reinforcing cross-reference patterns over multiple days. From 1505 to 1550, operational procedures continue. Sewing machines hum, fabric is squared and pressed, thread alignment checked. Environmental conditions are logged: sunlight angle, floor vibration, street noise. Minor deviations are annotated: chair leg tilt, pin displacement, faint reflections off polished surfaces. Each procedural detail is preserved to maintain a complete baseline for interpreting client behavior. By 1600 hours, the dressmaker recognizes a crucial insight: repeated scarf adjustments, metallic reflections, and private fitting requests form a consistent behavioral sequence. Cross-referenced with environmental data and longitudinal observation, these actions are no longer coincidental. There is a deliberate pattern of concealment and controlled microactions that suggest covert activity. Between 1605 and 1645, the client's final movements for the day confirm prior sequences. Subtle glances toward the entrance coincide precisely with metallic glints beneath the coat lining, followed by privacy requests. Each micro-gesture, environmental factor, and time-stamped observation is logged systematically. The cumulative record now supports a procedural inference: the client's behaviors are orchestrated, purposeful, and likely tied to the handling of concealed objects. As 1650 approaches, the shop closes. Ledgers, observational notebooks, and fabric records are cataloged. Patterns are reviewed: repeated scarf adjustments, metallic glints, privacy insistence, deliberate hand concealments. While the client's intent remains unconfirmed, the evidence gathered across 5 consecutive days, documented with rigorous procedural precision, provides the first actionable confirmation of deliberate, non-routine behavior. The dressmaker's careful record-keeping has transformed observation into recognition. Evening descends over the midtown block. Dust motes drift in beams of fading light. The distant city hum continues, and the atelier sits quiet, yet charged with latent tension. Every stitch, fold, reflection, and microaction has been logged and cataloged. Recurrent anomalies, once dismissed as coincidence, now constitute a discernible pattern of deliberate concealment. The first confirmations of espionage, or at least clandestine activity, exist in procedural form: time-stamped, environmental contextualized, and systematically recorded. The stage is set for escalation.